The blood was still fresh on the walls of Station Omega-7 when I first heard about Earth's so-called apex predator. 3 cycles had passed since the massacre, and the stench of death clung to the metal corridors like a curse that refused to lift. I am Commander Zylak of the Hegemony Fleet, and in my 200 years of service, I had never seen carnage quite like this. It started as a joke, really. A harmless question posed during what should have been a routine diplomatic meeting. The kind of small talk that fills the void between species trying not to kill each other. But humans, as I would soon learn, don't do anything small. The human delegation had arrived on our flagship 3 days prior, led by a woman named Captain Maria Santos. She was smaller than most of her kind, standing barely 6 feet tall with dark hair pulled back in what they call a ponytail. Her eyes were brown, warm even. The kind that made you think she might actually care about the words coming out of your mouth. How wrong we were. So tell me, Captain Santos, I had said, my forearms gesturing casually as we toured the observation deck. What exactly is the apex predator on your world? We've studied your databases, but the information seems contradictory. She stopped walking. The smile that crossed her face should have been my first warning. It wasn't the polite diplomatic expression I'd grown accustomed to from other species. No, this was something else entirely. Something that made the scales along my spine ripple with unease. That's an interesting question, Commander, she replied, her voice carrying a tone I couldn't quite place. What do you think it is? My aide, Sub-Commander Rex, stepped forward eagerly. He was young, barely past his first molting, and still believed that knowledge from databases translated to wisdom. According to our research, it should be the creature you call a great white shark. Or perhaps the saltwater crocodile. The data suggests a lot of things, Santos interrupted, still wearing that unsettling smile. But you asked about apex predators, not just dangerous animals. I felt my secondary hearts begin to beat faster. There was something in her tone, something that spoke of secrets and violence barely contained. Please, enlighten us. That's when she did it. That's when Captain Maria Santos, diplomatic representative of the human species, slowly raised her hand and pointed directly at herself. The apex predator on Earth, she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, is standing right in front of you. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the soft hum of the ship's engines, the barely audible breathing of my crew members, and underneath it all, the sound of my own blood rushing through my veins. Rex let out a nervous chittering sound that passed for laughter among our kind. Surely you jest? I managed to say, my translator struggling with the concept. Santos tilted her head, and for a moment something flickered behind those brown eyes, something ancient and predatory and absolutely terrifying. Do I look like I'm joking, Commander? That was 6 months ago. 6 months before the war that would reshape the galaxy. 6 months before I learned that Captain Maria Santos wasn't just making conversation. She was issuing a warning. The first sign of trouble came from the Outer Rim colonies, settlements that had stood for centuries, simply vanished. Not destroyed, not conquered, just empty. The inhabitants gone without a trace, their belongings left behind as if they had simply walked away from their lives. At first we blamed pirates. The Outer Rim had always been lawless, a haven for smugglers and mercenaries who preyed on legitimate commerce. But when the investigation teams arrived, they found something that made no sense. The colonies were intact, not a single building damaged, no signs of struggle, no bodies. The inhabitants had simply disappeared, leaving behind meals half-eaten and communications logs that cut off mid-sentence. It's impossible, Rex reported to me as we stood in the command center of our flagship, the Dominator. An entire colony of 12,000 inhabitants doesn't just vanish into thin air. I stared at the holographic display showing the empty streets of New Kepler, a mining colony that had housed some of our most productive workers. What about the security footage? That's the strange part, sir. The cameras show people going about their daily routines, and then, he paused, manipulating the controls to fast forward through the footage. And then they start walking. All of them. At the same time, they leave their homes, their workplaces, their schools, and they walk to the landing pads. They board transport ships that aren't in our registry, and they leave. They leave willingly. More than willingly, sir. They look happy. Relieved even. I felt my scales ripple again. That same unease I'd experienced during my conversation with Santos. Pull up the communication logs from the past month. Any contact with human vessels. Grix's claws clicked against the control surface as he worked. After a few moments, his crest flattened against his skull. A sign of distress among our kind. Sir, there are records of human diplomatic vessels visiting each colony approximately 1 week before the disappearances. The pieces began to fall into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. Get me a direct line to High Command. Now. The response from High Command was predictably dismissive. Admiral Korath, whose family had controlled the military for generations, listened to my report with the patience of someone indulging a child's fantasy. Commander Zylak. His image flickered on the main screen, his massive frame filling the display. You're suggesting that humans somehow convinced 12,000 of our citizens to abandon their homes and families? Without coercion? Without violence? I'm suggesting, Admiral, that we severely underestimated them during our initial contact. Korvac's laugh was like grinding metal. They're a young species, Zylak, barely out of their system. They have no advanced weapons, no superior technology. Their ships are held together with what they call duct tape and hope. What could they possibly offer our people that would make them abandon everything? I don't know, sir. But I intend to find out. See that you do. But quietly, Commander. The last thing we need is panic spreading through the colonies over some imagined human threat. The connection ended, leaving me staring at a blank screen and wondering if I was losing my mind. Maybe Korath was right. Maybe there was a simple explanation for what was happening. Maybe I was seeing threats where none existed. That illusion lasted exactly 4 days. The attack on Mining Station Alpha 9 shattered any remaining doubt about human intentions. But it wasn't the attack itself that changed everything. It was how they did it. I arrived at the station 3 hours after the distress signal cut out. What I found defied everything I thought I knew about warfare, about tactics, about the very nature of conflict itself. The station was a fortress. Automated defense systems, energy shields, a garrison of 2,000 of our finest warriors. It should have taken a fleet to breach those defenses. The humans brought 3 ships, and they turned our impregnable fortress into a graveyard. How many survivors? I asked Lieutenant Kess, as we surveyed the carnage from the station's command center. 47, sir. All of them wounded. All of them changed. Changed how? Kess, normally as steady as bedrock, was trembling. They won't stop talking about her, sir. About the human who led the assault. They say she knew things about them, personal things. She spoke to each of them by name, knew their fears, their hopes, their families. I felt ice forming in my secondary stomach. Are you telling me that a human knew the personal details of 2,000 station personnel? More than that, sir. She knew their psychological profiles. She knew exactly what to say to break them. Some surrendered immediately. Others fought until she whispered something in their ear, and then they laid down their weapons and wept. The implications hit me like a meteor. Get me the station's personnel files. Cross-reference them with any human diplomatic contacts in the past year. The answer came back within minutes, and it confirmed my worst fears. Every single member of the station's crew had encountered human diplomats during shore leave, routine inspections, or cultural exchange programs. Innocent interactions. Casual conversation. Conversations that had been carefully orchestrated intelligence-gathering operations. Sir, Brex's voice cracked as he spoke. I'm reading multiple hyperspace signatures approaching our position. Unknown configuration. The tactical display lit up with red markers as ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace. Not the massive dreadnoughts of traditional warfare, but smaller vessels. Fast, agile, and far too many to count. How many? I demanded. Sensors are having difficulty getting an exact count, sir. The ships are using some kind of stealth technology that interferes with our targeting systems. Best estimate, 300 vessels. Maybe more. 300 ships. against my single flagship and its escort squadron. In any conventional engagement, we would be overwhelmed in minutes. But these weren't conventional ships, and this wouldn't be a conventional battle. The communication array crackled to life and a familiar voice filled the command center. "Hello, Commander Zylak. This is Captain Maria Santos. I believe we have some unfinished business." Her image appeared on the main screen, and I was shocked by how little she had changed. Still small, still wearing that unsettling smile. But now I could see something in her eyes that I had missed during our first meeting. Something that made my blood run cold. Intelligence. Ancient, calculating, utterly ruthless intelligence. "Captain Santos," I managed to say, "what do you want?" "What I've always wanted, Commander. To answer your question about apex predators." The ship shuddered as the first wave of human fighters screamed past our hull, their weapons carving through our shields like they were made of paper. But they weren't trying to destroy us. Not yet. "You see," Santos continued, her voice calm despite the chaos erupting around us, "when you asked about Earth's apex predator, you made a fundamental error. You assumed it was about physical strength or speed or natural weapons. Another wave of fighters, this time targeting our weapon systems with surgical precision. My crew scrambled to return fire, but the humans were everywhere at once, striking from angles that should have been impossible. But that's not what makes a predator apex, Commander. What makes a predator truly dangerous isn't its claws or its teeth. It's its ability to understand its prey." The lights flickered as our main power grid took a hit. Emergency systems came online, bathing the command center in red light that made everything look like it was soaked in blood. Humans spent 100,000 years hunting creatures faster than us, stronger than us, more naturally armed than us. Do you know how we did it? I wanted to cut the transmission, to focus on the battle, but something in her voice held me transfixed. This wasn't just a military engagement. This was a lesson. We learned to think like them. We studied their behavior, their habits, their fears. We became so good at understanding other creatures that we could predict their every move before they made it. The ship shuddered again, and I realized that the humans weren't just attacking randomly. They were hurting us, forcing us into a specific position. But for what? And then we met the galaxy, Commander. And the galaxy was full of new prey. That's when I understood. The diplomatic missions, the cultural exchanges, the innocent conversations with our personnel. The humans hadn't been trying to make friends. They had been studying us. Every interaction your people had with my species was catalogued, analyzed, and added to our understanding of how you think, how you fight, how you break. We know your strengths, Commander Zylak. More importantly, we know your weaknesses. The final piece of the trap snapped into place as massive human warships materialized around us, their stealth systems dropping to reveal vessels that dwarfed anything in our fleet. But it wasn't their size that terrified me. It was the fact that they had been there all along, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "This isn't possible," I whispered. Santos' eye widened. That's what the great white sharks thought too. The barrage that followed wasn't random destruction. It was surgery. Human weapons carved through our defenses with impossible precision, targeting specific systems in an exact sequence that left us helpless, but alive. They could have destroyed us in seconds. Instead, they chose to demonstrate their complete superiority. Within minutes, we were dead in space. Life support failing. Weapons offline, communications array damaged but still functional. They wanted us to hear what came next. "Commander," Santos's voice was almost gentle now. "You asked what Earth's apex predator was. I gave you the answer. Now let me show you what that means." The screens around the command center lit up with feeds from across the sector. Colony after colony, military installation after military installation, all falling to human forces. But not through overwhelming firepower or superior numbers, through knowledge. Each attack was perfectly tailored to its target. The humans knew exactly which psychological pressure points to hit, which tactical doctrines their enemies would follow, which weaknesses to exploit. They fought as if they had written the playbook for every opposing force themselves. Because they had. You see, Commander, while your people were busy cataloging our technology and dismissing us as primitives, We were doing something far more dangerous. We were learning to be used. Station after station fell. Fleet after fleet surrendered. In less than 6 hours, the entire outer rim had fallen under human control. Not conquered. Absorbed. The beings we relocated from those colonies? They're not prisoners, Commander. They're guests. We offered them something your hegemony never could. What? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. A choice. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Choice. Such a simple concept, but one that our rigid hierarchy had never truly embraced. Our people followed orders, maintained discipline, obeyed the chain of command. It was who we were. But humans had shown them something different. They had shown them what it meant to decide their own fate. Your people are welcome to join us, Commander. All of them, but understand that if they choose to stay with the hegemony, if they choose to fight us. Her smile faded, and for the first time I saw the true predator lurking behind those brown eyes. Let's just say that humans have been very good at dealing with creatures that refuse to evolve. The transmission ended, leaving us alone in the darkness of our dying ship. Around me, my crew sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just witnessed. The complete and total defeat of everything they had believed about human capabilities. But I was thinking about something else, something Santos had said during that first meeting 6 months ago. When I had asked about apex predators, she hadn't just pointed to herself. She had pointed to humanity. And now, floating in the wreckage of our assumptions about galactic dominance, I finally understood what she meant. Humans weren't just another species trying to find their place in the galaxy. They were the galaxy's new apex predator, and we had just become prey. The rescue came 18 hours later, but by then it was far too late for rescue to matter. The human fleet had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving us floating in the void with nothing but our thoughts and the growing realization that everything we knew about warfare had just become obsolete. Admiral Korath's face filled the screen of our temporary command center aboard the rescue vessel Retribution. His expression had lost its earlier smugness, replaced by something I had never seen in his eyes before: fear. "Explain to me again how 3 human ships destroyed an entire battle station," he demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "They didn't destroy it, Admiral," I replied, studying the tactical readouts spread across the holotable. "They conquered it. There's a difference." "Don't play word games with me, Zylak." "I'm not playing anything, sir. The humans left the station intact. They removed our people, disabled our weapons, and then they left. The infrastructure is undamaged. The facilities are operational. They could move in tomorrow if they wanted to." Korath's crest flattened against his skull. "That makes no sense. Why capture territory if you're not going to hold it?" That was the question that had been eating at me since the attack. Why indeed? I had spent the past day analyzing every detail of the human assault, and the more I studied it, the more terrified I became. "Because they're not interested in our territory, Admiral. They're interested in our people." Nonsense. What use could they possibly have for our citizens? I activated the holographic display showing him the footage from Station Alpha 9. The images were crystal clear, human soldiers moving through the corridors with impossible precision, speaking to our personnel in perfect hegemony standard, calling them by name, discussing their families and dreams with intimate knowledge. "They're recruiting, sir. Every person they encounter becomes a potential asset. They don't want to rule us through force. They want us to choose to join them." Korvath's laugh was hollow. "And you think our people would betray their own species for these upstart humans?" Before I could answer, Sub-Commander Vrex burst into the command center, his scales flushed with panic. "Admiral, sir, we're receiving surrender broadcasts from the entire 7th Fleet." The blood drained from Korath's face. "That's impossible. Admiral Nexus commands the 7th. He would never surrender to anyone, let alone humans." Rex's claws trembled as he worked the controls. "Sir, you need to see this." The main screen shifted to show Admiral Nexus himself, standing in what appeared to be the bridge of his flagship. But something was wrong. The old warrior's posture was relaxed, almost casual. His eyes held an expression I had never seen before: contentment. "People of the hegemony," Nexus began, his voice carrying across the stars. I speak to you not as your admiral, but as someone who has seen the truth. For too long, we have lived under a system that values obedience over freedom, hierarchy over choice, conquest over cooperation. Korath sputtered incoherently, but I found myself listening intently. There was something in Nexus's voice, something that spoke of genuine conviction rather than coercion. The humans have shown us another way. They have offered us something our own government never could, the right to determine our own destiny. I am not surrendering to an enemy. I am choosing to join allies. The transmission cut out, leaving us in stunned silence. Admiral Nexus had been Korath's mentor, his closest friend. If they could turn it— How? Korath whispered. How did they do this? I had been asking myself the same question, and I was beginning to understand the terrifying answer. They didn't break him, Admiral. They convinced him. There's a difference. Convinced him of what? That there was a better way to live. The next few days brought a cascade of defections that shattered everything we thought we knew about loyalty and military discipline. Not just individuals, but entire fleets. Whole planetary governments, even core worlds that had been part of the hegemony for centuries, began declaring their independence and requesting human protection. But it wasn't chaos. It was orchestrated. Every defection followed the same pattern. First contact with human diplomats, followed by a period of cultural exchange, then sudden and total conversion to the human cause. They're using some kind of mind control technology, insisted General Mordak during our emergency war council. It's the only explanation. Is it? I asked, studying the psychological profiles of the defectors. Look at these reports. Every single person who joined the humans had expressed dissatisfaction with hegemony policies in the past. Every one of them had filed complaints, submitted requests for reassignment, or shown signs of discontent. So, Mordak's scarred face twisted with confusion. So the humans didn't change their minds. They simply offered them an alternative to a system they already wanted to leave. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. We weren't fighting against mind control or superior technology. We were fighting against hope, and hope, as any military strategist will tell you, is the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. That's when Captain Maria Santos contacted us again. Her image appeared on our communication array without warning, somehow bypassing our security protocols as if they didn't exist. She was standing in what appeared to be the bridge of a massive warship, but the design was unlike anything in our databases. Hello again, Commander Zylak. Admiral Korath. I trust you've been watching the news. Korath stepped forward, his massive frame radiating fury. What have you done to our people, human? Santos tilted her head with that same unsettling smile. I gave them a choice, Admiral. Something your government seems reluctant to do. We demand the immediate return of our citizens. Demand? Santos's laugh was like breaking glass. Admiral, I think you misunderstand your position. You're not in a place to demand anything. The tactical display suddenly lit up with thousands of red markers. Human ships, appearing all around us as their stealth system deactivated. We were surrounded by a fleet so vast it defied comprehension. How long have you been there? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. We've been watching this conversation from the beginning, Commander. Your security is quaint. Korvac's hand moved toward his sidearm, but I caught his wrist. Don't. She's not here. Very perceptive, Santos nodded approvingly. I'm actually several hundred light-years away, safely aboard the HMS Apex. This is simply a holographic projection. But my fleet is very real and very present. The ships around us began to move, but not in any attack formation I recognized. Instead, they formed complex geodesic patterns, weaving between our vessels with impossible precision. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was a demonstration of control so absolute that resistance seemed meaningless. What do you want? Korath demanded. I want to show you something, Admiral, something important. The screen split, showing feeds from across the galaxy. Worlds that had been under hegemony control for centuries, now flying human flags. But they weren't conquered territories. They were thriving. The cities were cleaner, brighter. The people moved with purpose rather than fear. This is New Terra, Santos explained as the camera focused on a gleaming metropolis. Formerly your mining colony, Designation 77 Alpha. Population. When you controlled it, 3 million. Current population, 4.7 million. Impossible, Korath breathed. Not impossible, Admiral, inevitable. When people are free to pursue their own interests rather than follow arbitrary commands, they accomplish remarkable things. Another feed showed massive orbital shipyards, larger and more advanced than anything the hegemony had ever built. These are the Prometheus yards, built in 6 months by former hegemony engineers who were told they could design whatever they wanted instead of following century-old blueprints. The evidence was overwhelming. Every world that had joined the humans was better off. Not subjugated, but liberated. Not conquered, but enhanced. You're lying, Korath said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Would you like to speak to some of your former citizens directly? Before he could answer, the screen filled with faces. Hundreds of them, people we recognized. Officers from our own fleets, administrators from our colonies, even members of the High Council who had supposedly died in accidents over the past year. Admiral Korath, one of them spoke. A woman I recognized as Captain Thyra from the 4th Battle Group. I know this is difficult to understand, but I need you to listen. Really listen. Korvac's composure cracked. Thyra, but you're dead. Your ship was destroyed by pirates. My ship was rescued by humans, Admiral. They offered me and my crew a choice: return to a hegemony court-martial for failing to prevent pirate attacks, or join them and help build something better. And you chose treason. Thyra's expression softened with something approaching pity. I chose freedom, Admiral. The freedom to protect people instead of territory. The freedom to explore instead of patrol. The freedom to choose my own missions based on what I believe is right. More faces appeared. More testimonials. Each one more damning than the last. Not because they spoke of human cruelty or conquest, but because they spoke of human kindness and opportunity. Stop this! Korath roared, but his voice was breaking. Santos reappeared on the screen, her expression almost sympathetic. I know this is hard to accept, Admiral. Your entire worldview is being challenged. But I need you to understand something crucial. The view shifted to show Earth itself, the blue marble that had somehow given birth to the galaxy's most effective predators. But instead of the primitive world we had expected, it showed gleaming cities, orbital habitats, and ships beyond counting. When my species first reached for the stars, we made a promise to ourselves. We would never become the monsters we had fought so hard to escape on our own world. We would never rule through fear or force when we could lead through example and choice. Then why are you doing this? I asked. Why destroy the hegemony? Santos' smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of cold determination. Because, Commander, some systems are so fundamentally broken that they cannot be reformed. They can only be replaced. The screen split again, this time showing footage from hegemony prison worlds, labor camps where dissidents were worked to death, execution chambers where free thinkers were eliminated, the dark underbelly of our civilization that we pretended didn't exist. Your government has ruled through fear for 800 years, Santos continued. 800 years of crushing anyone who dared to dream of something better. 800 years of telling entire species that their only purpose was to serve the hegemony's interests. We brought order to the galaxy. Korath protested. You brought submission. There's a difference. I felt something cold settle in my secondary stomach as the truth hit me. This isn't about conquest, is it? This is about revolution. Santos nodded approvingly. Finally, someone understands. We're not trying to replace the hegemony with another empire. We're trying to replace it with something that has never existed before. A truly voluntary alliance of free worlds. And if we refuse, her smile returned, but now it carried the promise of violence. Then you'll discover why humans became Earth's apex predator, Admiral. Not because we're the strongest or the fastest, but because we're the most persistent. We spent 100,000 years chasing mammoths across frozen wastes, tracking prey for days without rest, outlasting creatures that should have been able to escape us easily. The human fleet around us began to move again, but this time in attack formation. Thousands of ships, each one positioned with mathematical precision to deliver maximum damage. We will hunt you, Admiral. We will follow you to every system, every colony, every hidden base. We will offer your people the same choice we've offered everyone else, freedom or continued servitude. And eventually, when enough of them choose freedom, you'll be left with nothing but empty ships and the bitter knowledge that you could have chosen differently. Korvath was trembling now, his lifetime of certainty crumbling around him. What kind of monsters are you? The kind that learned how to be better, Santos replied. The kind that chose evolution over extinction. The kind that decided cooperation was more powerful than domination. The transmission began to fade, but Santos' voice remained clear. You have 72 hours to decide, Admiral. Surrender and help us build something worthy of the galaxy's potential, or watch everything you've built turn to ash. And if we choose to fight, Santos' final words chilled me to the bone. Then you'll learn why we call it a food chain, Admiral, and you'll discover exactly where the hegemony fits on it. The screen went dark, leaving us alone with our fears and the growing realization that we were facing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that fought not for conquest, but for the right to choose. And against that kind of enemy, all our weapons and all our fleets meant nothing. Because how do you fight hope itself? How do you defeat a species that offers your own people something better than what you can provide? How do you win a war when your enemy's greatest weapon is the promise of freedom? I looked at Admiral Korath's broken expression and realized the terrible truth. We couldn't. We had never stood a chance. The humans had been hunting us from the moment they left their homeworld. They had studied us, understood us, and prepared for this moment with the patience of born predators. And now, finally, they were ready to feed. 72 hours. 3 days to decide the fate of an empire that had endured for 8 centuries. 3 days to choose between surrender and annihilation. 3 days to watch everything we believed about galactic power crumble into dust. Admiral Korath spent the first day in denial, frantically contacting every remaining hegemony fleet, calling in favors from allied species, desperately trying to assemble a force capable of matching human firepower. The responses were enlightened. Admiral, came the reply from the Draconian Empire. We appreciate your long friendship, but we cannot commit our fleets against the humans. They have made us a very generous offer for neutrality. The Crystalline Confederation was more direct. We have reviewed human proposals for trade agreements and technological exchange. These terms are far superior to our current hegemony contracts. We withdraw from our mutual defense treaty, effective immediately. Even the Void Hunters, mercenaries who would fight anyone for the right price, declined our employment offers. Their message was brief. Humans pay better, and they guarantee our crews will survive. By the end of the first day, we stood alone. This is impossible, Korath muttered, staring at the tactical display showing the steady stream of defections. We built this alliance over centuries. These species owe us their very existence. Do they? I asked, reviewing the communication logs. Or did we simply convince them they had no other choice? Commander Rex looked up from his station, his young face etched with confusion. Sir, I've been analyzing the human offers to our allies. They're not demanding submission or tribute. They're offering genuine partnerships, equal representation in decision-making, shared technology, mutual defense without hierarchical command structures. It's a trick, Korath snarled. No species gives away power voluntarily, don't they? I pulled up the human constitutional documents that had somehow appeared in our databases. According to these files, human governments are chosen by their people through regular elections. Leaders who fail to serve their citizens' interests are removed from power. The concept of permanent inherited authority is foreign to them. Korvath's crest flattened completely. That's chaos. That's the collapse of civilization. Is it? Look at the productivity reports from the worlds that joined them. Look at the innovation indices. Look at the population happiness surveys. I didn't need to finish the sentence. The data spoke for itself. Every measurable indicator of societal health had improved dramatically under human influence, not through force or coercion, but through the simple act of allowing people to choose their own destiny. The second day brought news that shattered Korath's remaining composure. The entire High Council had voted to negotiate with the humans. Traitors? He roared, smashing his fist against the command console. Every last one of them. Or, I said quietly, they're doing what they think is best for our people. The transmission from the council chambers showed Eldest Dracus, the ancient leader who had guided our species for over a century. His usually imperious expression had been replaced by something I had never seen before. Humility. People of the hegemony, he began, his voice carrying the weight of history. For 800 years, our ancestors built an empire based on the belief that order must be imposed from above, that lesser species required our guidance, that peace could only be maintained through strength. Korvath tried to cut the transmission, but human technology had somehow made our own communication systems immune to our control. We could only watch as our civilization's most powerful figure dismantled everything we believed. We were wrong, Draxix continued. Not about the need for order, but about how to achieve it. The humans have shown us that true stability comes not from fear, but from hope. Not from submission, but from willing cooperation. He's been compromised, Korath whispered. They've done something to his mind. But I could see the truth in Dracus's eyes. This wasn't coercion. This was revelation. The old leader had seen something that had fundamentally changed his worldview, and now he was sharing that vision with the rest of our species. Therefore, Dracus concluded, the High Council formally requests negotiations with the human alliance. We seek not surrender, but partnership, not conquest, but cooperation. The hegemony as we have known it is ending. What rises from its ashes will be something far greater. The transmission ended, leaving Korith standing alone in the wreckage of his certainty. Around the command center I could see the same expression on every face, acceptance. The war was over before it had truly begun. But Koreth wasn't finished. Not yet. Gather the Praetorian Guard, he ordered, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. Every ship, every soldier still loyal to the old ways. If the Council wants to grovel before these human upstarts, they can do it without me. The Admiral, I tried to reason with him. We're outgunned, outmaneuvered, and outclassed. What can we possibly accomplish? His smile was the expression of a man who had moved beyond rational thought. We can show them what happens when apex predators try to hunt real monsters. The final battle began 18 hours before the deadline expired. Korvath had assembled the largest hegemony fleet in recorded history, 12,000 ships crewed by fanatics who would rather die than submit to human authority. It was magnificent. It was heroic. It was completely doomed. The human response was swift and devastating in its elegance. They didn't send massive battle fleets to meet us. They didn't deploy super weapons or exotic technologies. Instead, they sent Captain Maria Santos in a single ship. One ship against 12,000. This is your final warning, her voice echoed across all frequencies, as her vessel, the HMS Apex, dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of our battle formation. Stand down and you will be treated with honor. Continue this course and face the consequences. Korath's laugh was bitter. One ship. They send one ship against the mightiest fleet ever assembled. The arrogance is staggering. Admiral Vrex called out, his voice tight with confusion. I'm reading massive power signatures from the human vessel. It's like nothing I've ever seen. The Apex was smaller than our flagship, sleek where our ships were bulky, elegant where ours were brutal. But as we watched, sections of its hull began to unfold like a blooming flower, revealing weapon systems that defied classification. All ships, Korvath commanded, open fire. 12,000 ships unleashed everything they had. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids, missiles that could crack planetary crusts, railguns that fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The combined firepower was sufficient to sterilize entire solar systems. It never reached the apex. Instead, something impossible happened. The space around the human ship began to bend. Reality itself warped as gravitational fields stronger than those produced by neutron stars formed protective barriers around Santos' vessel. Our weapons' fire was captured, compressed, and redirected back at us with compound interest. In the first 30 seconds of engagement, we lost 800 ships to our own weapons. What kind of technology is this? Korath demanded, watching in horror as our forces were systematically dismantled by their own firepower. Santos' voice provided the answer. Human technology, Admiral. Built by engineers who were told they could pursue any idea no matter how outrageous. Funded by governments that believed in advancement over tradition, created by a species that never accepted that something was impossible just because it had never been done before. The apex began to move, and its motion was like watching death itself dance among the stars. It didn't fly so much as fold space around itself, appearing in multiple locations simultaneously, striking with weapons that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics with each shot. But it wasn't just the technology that terrified me. It was the precision. Every shot was perfectly placed to disable rather than destroy. Every attack was calculated to minimize casualties while maximizing psychological impact. Santos wasn't trying to kill us. She was trying to teach us. Surrender now, her voice carried across the chaos, and your crews will live to see their families again. That's when the defections began. It started with a single destroyer, its captain broadcasting his surrender on all frequencies. Then another. Then an entire squadron. Within minutes, fully half of our loyal fleet had laid down their arms and requested human protection. Cowards, Korath screamed. All of you, fight. But they wouldn't. They couldn't, because Santos had shown them something that shattered the last illusion of hegemony's superiority. She was fighting alone against impossible odds, and winning effortlessly. You want to know about apex predators, Admiral? Santa's voice cut through Korath's rage like a blade. Let me tell you about persistence hunting. My ancestors would select a prey animal and chase it for days, weeks if necessary. Not fast enough to catch it quickly, but fast enough to prevent it from resting. Eventually, exhaustion would do what speed and strength could not. The remaining ships tried to retreat, but the apex was everywhere at once, herding them like sheep, preventing escape while offering constant opportunities for surrender. We've been hunting you for 6 months, Admiral. Not with weapons, but with ideas. Not with force, but with hope. We've been showing your people that there's another way to live, another way to think, another way to dream. Korvac's ship, the mighty Dominator, found itself alone in space, abandoned by its escorts, surrounded by the wreckage of an empire's last stand. And now, Santos continued, her voice almost gentle, you're exhausted. Your people have seen the truth. Your allies have abandoned you. Your government has surrendered. You are a predator with no prey left to hunt. The apex materialized directly in front of us, close enough that we could see its elegant curves, its weapon ports still glowing with restrained power. What happens now? Korath asked, his voice barely a whisper. Now, Santos replied, you evolve, or you become extinct. The choice, as always, is yours. For a long moment, silence reigned in the command center. Then slowly, Admiral Korath reached for his sidearm. Not to shoot Santos, but to point it at his own head. I will not live to see the hegemony's destruction, he declared. Stop! My voice surprised everyone, including myself. Admiral, please. Look around you. On the screens surrounding us, feeds from across the galaxy showed the aftermath of the human revolution. Former hegemony worlds celebrating their liberation, mixed species crews working together on impossible projects, children of different races playing together in parks that had never known such freedom. Is this destruction? I asked. Or is this what we could have been all along if we hadn't been so afraid of change? Korvac's hand trembled as he stared at the images. A draconian engineer working alongside a human scientist. A crystalline artist teaching younglings from a dozen different species. Former enemies embracing as equals. They took everything from us, he whispered. They gave everything back to us, I corrected. They just stopped letting us hoard it at everyone else's expense. The weapon fell from Korath's hand, clattering to the deck with the sound of an empire's final breath. Santa's image appeared on our main screen one last time, but now she wasn't wearing the uniform of a military commander. Instead, she wore simple civilian clothes, the kind a diplomat might wear to a peaceful negotiation. The transition is complete, she announced. The galactic hegemony is dissolved. In its place, we establish the Free Worlds Alliance, based on the principles of voluntary association, mutual respect, and shared prosperity. She turned to address Korath directly. "Admiral, you're welcome to join us. Your tactical knowledge and experience would be invaluable in building the new order, but you'll serve alongside others as an equal, not above them as a superior." Korath looked at me, his eyes holding a question I recognized from my own reflection. "What do you think, Commander? Are we apex predators, or are we prey?" I considered the question that had started this entire catastrophe. 6 months ago, I had asked Captain Santos about Earth's apex predator, expecting a simple answer about biology and natural selection. Instead, I had learned something far more profound. "I think," I said slowly, "that we've been thinking about it wrong from the beginning. The question isn't whether we're predators or prey. The question is whether we're willing to evolve." Korath nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning in his ancient eyes. "And if we choose to evolve," Santos smiled, and for the first time it held no trace of menace. "Only welcome. Then you become human," she said simply. "Not genetically, but philosophically. You become a species that chooses cooperation over domination, growth over stagnation, hope over fear. And if we refuse," her smile didn't falter, "then you become history. But don't worry, Admiral. We'll remember you fondly." The transmission ended, leaving us alone with our decision. Around us, the last remnants of the hegemony fleet waited for orders that would never come. Behind us, 8 centuries of tradition and hierarchy crumbled into dust. Ahead of us, an uncertain future beckoned with promises we were only beginning to understand. I looked at Admiral Korath and saw my own choice reflected in his eyes. We could cling to the past and die with it, or we could embrace the future and live to see what wonders it might bring. "Well, Admiral," I said, extending my hand in the human gesture of greeting I had seen Santos use so often, "shall we see what it's like to be human?" Korath stared at my outstretched hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and grasped it. "God help us," he whispered. Yes, and in that moment I finally understood what Captain Maria Santos had been trying to tell us from the very beginning. The apex predator of Earth wasn't the strongest or the fastest or the most naturally armed. It was the most adaptable. It was the species that never stopped evolving, never stopped learning, never stopped reaching for something better than what they were. It was the species that had looked at a galaxy full of empires built on fear and decided to show them what could be built on hope instead. The hegemony was dead. Long live humanity, and long live the rest of us, who were finally free to become whatever we chose to be. The hunt was over. The meal was finished. We had never tasted anything so sweet as the freedom to choose our own destiny. Captain Santos had been right all along. Humans were Earth's apex predator. But now, thanks to them, we all could be.